I'll never forget that November night in 2005, sitting on the floor of my friend's living room because we didn't have high-speed internet at my house, and firing up Xbox Live on my brand new Xbox 360, and the first game I popped in, Call of Duty 2. As soon as that main menu loaded, I could tell this was gonna be something special. Call of Duty 2 launched in November 2005 as one of the Xbox 360's big day one titles. Developed by Infinity Ward and published by Activision, it was designed to take full advantage of the new hardware, and it delivered. The 360 had just hit shelves, and anyone lucky enough to snag one was on the hunt for a game that felt truly next gen. For a lot of players, this was it. At the time, the gaming world was in a weird but exciting place. The original Xbox and PS2 were still getting major releases, but the 360 was starting to shift the conversation. High-definition gaming, online matchmaking on consoles, achievements, it all felt like a brand new world. Meanwhile, first-person shooters were everywhere, but many of them still felt rooted in the past. Halo 2 was still the online king, Medal of Honor was starting to lose steam around this time, and World War II games had become just another routine. Call of Duty 2 stood out by doing everything sharper, louder, and with more intensity than its competition. It wasn't reinventing the wheel, but it was making the ride smoother. At the time, it was also a commercial hit. The game sold over 1 million copies in its first year, and that was no small feat for a launch title. We didn't know it then, but we were watching the start of a new era for console shooters. What really made Call of Duty 2 stand out back then was how smooth and satisfying it felt to play. A lot of shooters in the early 2000s still had clunky aiming or stiff movement, especially on consoles. But this one nailed the fundamentals. Aiming down sights felt precise, weapon recoil was manageable without feeling floaty, and movement had just the right weight to it. You weren't just flying around the map like you were on ice, but you also weren't lumbering around like you were a tank. The gunplay was tight across the board, whether you were using a bolt-action rifle or a submachine gun. Every weapon felt distinct and, more importantly, felt powerful. You could actually hear the difference when you switched guns, which was a big deal at the time. The level design also deserves credit. Missions were mostly linear, but they didn't feel like corridors. Oh hey, I forgot to mention 3 things real quick. 1, if you want to pick up your own copy on Xbox 360, I was able to find it for a crazy steal. I'll drop a link to that in the description box below if you want to grab it for yourself. Using that link does help out the channel, so I appreciate it. Thing number 2, this is a brand new channel that I'm just starting here, so if this is the kind of video that you enjoy watching or you want to see more reviews of some classic games, make sure you subscribe to this channel. I'd appreciate that as well. And thing number 3, what are some old school, maybe underappreciated games that you would like to see me play and do a review of? Whatever ones that you have in mind, drop those in the comments below, and I'll be sure to do them. All right, back to the video. There were multiple routes through some areas, a decent amount of verticality, and smart enemy placement that kept you from just sprinting forward without thinking. Enemies would flank, suppress you with MG fire, or toss grenades to flush you out, so you had to stay alert. One thing that was pretty ahead of its time was the regenerating health system. Instead of hunting for med kits, you duck behind cover, let your screen desaturate from red back to normal, and then get back into the fight. That mechanic became a genre standard later on, but in 2005, it was a bold move. It made the pacing feel faster and more fluid, and it encouraged a different kind of movement, pushing forward in bursts instead of crawling through each room looking for health packs. Compared to other World War II shooters from that era like Brothers in Arms or Medal of Honor, Call of Duty 2 felt more refined and focused on immersion over tactical realism. It wasn't trying to simulate Battlefield Squad commands or loadouts, it just wanted you to drop into the chaos and survive. And that simplicity really worked in its favor. Story-wise, Call of Duty 2 keeps things pretty straightforward. You're not following one central character through a big personal arc. Instead, the game drops you into different roles across allied forces. You play through major World War II battles from the perspectives of Soviet, British, and American soldiers, each with their own missions and objectives. It's more about showing the scale of the war than telling a deeply personal story. And that approach really works. The game isn't trying to hit you with emotional cutscenes or dramatic monologues. It's more focused on immersing you in the moment-to-moment chaos of war. And that tone really comes off as gritty and serious. There's a constant sense of urgency with bullets flying, tanks rolling through ruined towns, and artillery shaking the ground under your feet. What sticks with me isn't any particular character, but the set piece. Storming bunkers under heavy fire, defending a bombed-out building while smoke grenades cloud your vision, or pushing through sandstorms in North Africa. Those moments absolutely hit hard. The game throws you into the middle of everything and rarely lets up. That focus on atmosphere over narrative depth made sense, especially for the time. The intensity and pacing carry the experience. You may not remember the names of all the soldiers you fought alongside, but you will remember the feeling of barely making it through a brutal fight with nothing but a rifle and a few grenades. At launch, Call of Duty 2 looked incredible, especially for a console game in 2005. This was one of the first real showcases for HD gaming on the Xbox 360, and it made a crazy strong first impression. The environments were detailed and gritty with muddy trenches, snowy ruins, and scorched deserts that actually felt like real places. It wasn't just a sharper version of what came before, it felt like a full step forward. One of the most talked about features back then was the smoke. Tossing a smoke grenade wasn't just a visual effect, it actually changed the way you played. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and it felt unpredictable and dynamic in a way that shooters hadn't really nailed before. For a launch title, that level of visual impact was huge. The user interface was clean and minimal, just a simple ammo count and compass with no distractions. That helped the game feel more immersive, and it left the action front and center. There weren't a bunch of flashy HUD elements or overly stylized menus, which gave the whole presentation a grounded, almost documentary-like vibe. Cutscenes were kept to a minimum, and most of the storytelling happened in mission through brief voiceovers or radio chatter. That choice helped keep the game's pacing tight, without dragging players away from the action for long, momentum-breaking cutscenes. Looking at it now, of course, it shows its age. Character models are blocky, animations are stiff by today's standards, and textures look a bit flat in spots, but the overall presentation still holds up surprisingly well. It has a consistent visual tone, and for a launch title, it absolutely delivered the kind of next-gen wow factor that people were so hungry for. Of course, it wasn't just the visuals doing the heavy lifting. The sound design in Call of Duty 2 was a huge part of what made it so immersive. Even though the game didn't lean as heavily on music as some of its later counterparts, the moments when the orchestral score did kick in, usually during big set pieces or final pushes, added just the right amount of tension and drama. It wasn't trying to give you a catchy theme song or anything, but the music served the atmosphere well. It was subtle when it needed to be and powerful when it counted, but it's the sound effects that really stood out. Gunfire sounded sharp and distinct, rifles cracked, machine guns rattled, and grenades had that deep, concussive boom that made you instinctively duck. The mix was aggressive in a good way, pulling you into the middle of the action. Explosions didn't just sound big, they felt big. Voice acting was also solid across the board. It wasn't overly dramatic, but it didn't need to be. The lines felt authentic, especially during combat. You'd hear squad mates shouting out positions or calling for cover or just yelling out over the chaos, and it all added to the illusion that you were part of something larger. The accents and the slang varied depending on which campaign you were playing, the Soviet, British, or American, which helped each one feel distinct without being overdone or cartoonish. All in all, Call of Duty 2 nailed the audio side of things in a way that a lot of shooters at the time didn't. It didn't just sound good. It sounded pretty real. Revisiting Call of Duty 2 today really takes me back to a time when games didn't need 100 features or a giant open world to be great. It focused on the basics: tight gunplay, strong mission design, and intense atmosphere. And it nailed all of it. Whether you're storming the beach, holding a ruined city block, or just soaking in the sound of distant artillery, it pulled you in and it didn't let go. Sure, it's a product of its time. There's no sprinting, no customizable loadouts, no fancy progression systems, but honestly, that's part of the charm. It's a snapshot of where shooters were headed right at the moment everything started to evolve. For me, Call of Duty 2 earns a solid 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's not just a nostalgic favorite, it's a genuinely great shooter that still holds up. If you enjoyed this trip back to the Xbox 360 launch era, hit that like button and let me know which classic game you want to see me cover next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time in the Spare Game Room. Be good.